Thanks, Les Count Corla. Yeah, I mean, Deputy Murphy has made many of the points, but just to say, we do welcome this bill. Single parents suffer disproportionately from poverty, and that's been well documented. It has remained consistently the case for many, many years now. And the fact that the amount of maintenance that a single parent might receive, the vast majority, of course, who are women, would be means tested and then impact on their social welfare payments is completely unacceptable when we have such a disproportionate level of poverty among lone parents. So we very much welcome this long overdue move to decouple maintenance from social welfare payments. But I would also add that it still will leave many, many lone parents in poverty, even with this improvement, because our basic rates of social welfare, whether it's the one parent family payment or other social welfare payments, are below the poverty level. So everybody who is a lone parent, not everybody, but huge numbers of our lone parents, pensioners, other people because of disability or for other reasons because they've lost their jobs, are forced to live in poverty. And it is our view that the basic social welfare and pension payments should increase to at least bring everybody above the poverty line. And I don't really see how in a society as wealthy as ours, one of the wealthiest in the world, that it can be justifiable to leave hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people still living in poverty. And I would also take this opportunity to repeat the call of the disability community to also add a premium payment. Our view is everybody should be getting at least €300 a week in pension or social welfare payments to lift them out of poverty, and people with disabilities should also get a premium payment above that. We acknowledged during the COVID crisis with the 350 figure that really nobody could or should be expected to live on less than 350, and I think there is no reason to continue to leave so many people, many of them lone parents, languishing in poverty. So while we welcome this bill and the decoupling of maintenance payments from social welfare, there is a hell of a lot more to do if we are going to lift lone parents and many, many others in our society out of poverty. I just also want to just briefly, and sorry, maybe just to elaborate a point, because I noticed Deputy Durkin with a wry smile on his face when Deputy Murphy referred to the recent Oxfam report and the extraordinary levels of wealth concentrated in the hands of a tiny, tiny proportion of our society. That Oxfam are only confirming what the central bank has confirmed. Just in case he's a little bit sceptical, I would suggest yeah, sure. Well, if you're sceptical, if you don't believe Oxfam, check out the central bank. They might be a source that you might consider maybe more reliable. I personally believe Oxfam are very reliable, but the central bank, something we have long asked for, have now started to produce figures on the distribution of wealth in this country. They have always, in their quarterly bulletins at the beginning of each year, shown the level of net wealth and assets in the country, but they never showed the distribution. And we had to essentially extrapolate from old studies on wealth distribution to work out what proportion of the wealth was in the different deciles of our population, in the hands of different deciles of the population. Now the central bank has confirmed what Oxfam, what we have been saying, what others have been saying for many, many years, with a report they did at the end of 2022, I think it was. 2022 it was. And they're now going to do this on an ongoing basis. And what they confirmed is that the richest 10% of our population have about 54% of all of the wealth. Massive. And the wealth is now in excess, net wealth in this country is now in excess of €1 trillion. So you can do the maths yourself. An extraordinary concentration of wealth in the hands of a tiny group of people. So that's the issue that needs to be addressed. There's more than enough wealth in Irish society to lift people out of poverty and to address, indeed, many of the problems we have and the lack of resources for housing, for infrastructure, for amenities, for decent paying conditions for working people, many of whom have seen themselves hammered with the cost of living crisis over the last few years. The money is there, but it is concentrated in the hands of a tiny few, and now we have the figures to back that up. And a wealth tax could begin to address that and redistribute that wealth in a fair way. Just a last couple of things, seeing as I have the Minister, just to mention on the issue of addressing poverty and the immediacy. Something I wasn't aware of, but I've been made aware by a number of pensioners who have come to my clinic over in the cold snap that we're now facing, is that there's a provision in the electricity credit, the 250 euros payments that people have been getting off their electricity bill, that if you don't reach a certain threshold of use, of electricity use, you don't get the payment. Now, I was quite shocked because I had elderly people come into me this week who made sure that their electricity use did not reach the 150 threshold because they couldn't afford to pay anything above it. They assumed they were going to get the 150 euro credit, so they kept their use just below 150, only to discover that because they had been, if you like, economising on their use of electricity, they weren't getting the payment at all. Now that's pretty terrible. That's pretty terrible, right? And when you look at how cold it is out there, so people who are cutting back on the use of electricity to heat their homes or to, other uses of electricity, now not getting the payment precisely because they were cutting back because they couldn't afford, they were afraid of the prospects of using too much electricity. So I would appeal, and of course, if you don't get those credits, I think you don't get a lot of the other stuff as well. So I would ask the government to immediately address that. That is just grossly unfair. It's grossly unfair. And the other thing I would ask the Minister, seeing as I have her, is again related to the cost of living and the cold snap and some of the additional payments the government has given to address the cost of living, is the people on short-term payments. Okay, so if you're on a so-called, and some of them aren't that short-term, if you're on a short-term payment, like illness benefit, job seekers allowance for less than 9 months, back to education, back to enterprise, and that list is not exhaustive, short-term payments, you're not getting any of the additional one-off cost of living payments or fuel allowance. Now that's not right, because those people are on the same levels of low income that everybody else who is getting the payments are. They have the same needs to heat their homes in the cold snap, in the winter, and all the rest of it. And just because they're on a shorter term payment, or they just lost their job, or they've gone on a back to education scheme, or a back to enterprise scheme, they are having to go through this cold snap and this and all the extortionate cost of living increases and the inflation increases without the support of the one-off payments, the fuel allowance and so on that have been given to everybody else. That is not fair. It's not fair. In many cases, it's actually penalising people for doing things like getting back into enterprise, trying to get back to work, trying to upskill themselves, or because they just happened to lose their job recently and no doubt are trying to get back into work, but they're being penalised because they lost their job. That is not fair. It's not fair, and I would ask the Minister to address that, and even at this late stage, give those cohorts the payments that have been given to others.